Now, the trucking industry has had quite a challenging year, from strikes that prevented it functioning fully to numerous fatal accidents. It's been a year to forget. The recent Boksburg tragedy, in which 27 people have lost their lives following a gas tanker explosion, brought the industry back into focus. And many are now calling for the rail network to be revitalized in order to eliminate the number of trucks on the road. Now, to look at the past year and what the future looks like for the trucking industry, I'm now joined by Gavin Kelly, CEO of the Road Freight Association. Gavin, thank you so much for your time, and a good morning to you. I think indeed, definitely the recent Boksburg gas tank explosion has placed the spotlight once again on road safety. And when you, as the Freight Association, reflect on such tragic events, I mean, how would you describe this particular incident and its impact on the industry?
Oh, good morning, Tumela. Good morning to all your listeners, and I trust you're all enjoying your festive break. And unfortunately, during this festive break, we had this terrible tragedy, and the amount of lives lost, irreplaceable lives, and it's really just something that we don't want to see in the sector or in the industry. And there are a number of questions. We don't have all the answers yet. There has to be an investigation to find out exactly what caused this, because that's the important thing, Tumela, is finding out what caused, not a knee-jerk reaction now to deal with the symptoms. So this is really, really a bad thing. And the first question that comes to mind is, why was that truck on that route? That is not a dedicated route. It would not be a route that that size of vehicle could travel on. So how did the driver find himself on that route? Was there something amiss? Did he feel threatened? Did he feel he was being hijacked? All those sorts of questions need to be asked. And then, importantly, what is the role of the transport company here? The operator in the National Road Traffic Act, the company is referred to an operator. On the street, we call them transport companies or transporters. So the question really needs to be asked, some very hard questions of the transporter. Do you monitor where your truck is all the time, not just once a day or once a week? Do you monitor where your truck is all the time? And as soon as it leaves the predetermined route, and these are what we call dangerous goods, they're chemicals, they're volatile, they obviously have special requirements in terms of transportation and packaging. So you should have known immediately that truck was off its route and then intervened. And then secondly, of speculation on social media, and I don't want to go into that, but the important question is, what sort of training do your drivers have? Do they do the refresher training? Do they understand what they need to do when they're in a situation? So there are some really tough questions this transporter has to answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Gavin, I couldn't agree more with some of the questions that you've just tabled now, because I think, this incident has almost tainted the image of, the road freight industry to say, is profit prioritized over the safety and lives of people? And I think we need that investigation to definitely get into those questions, to ask indeed, are we working amongst companies that are greedy enough to prioritize profits, shortcuts, as opposed to safety and lives? And I suppose that's what the investigation has to uncover.
Well, Tumela, you've hit the nail on the head. The first thing is that we've got a highly regulated industry. We've got lots of laws. There are over 23 different sets of legislation that govern the movement of goods on the road. The unfortunate part is we don't monitor them properly. The authorities are not doing what they should be doing. And when something like this happens, that's a wake-up call. There are plenty of operators out there, or transporters, who are not abiding by the law, and they're getting away with it. And these sorts of things, and you'll recall that horrible truck accident down near Upongolo, where, again, a truck visibly on the video material that we saw, and again, a lot of investigation has to happen there, did things that in the normal course of the day are not only illegal, they're very unsafe. So the question really is, how are we going to prevent this? How are we going to ensure that the very good laws that we have actually are practiced and implemented.
Yeah. Well, that's in terms of the recent events, Gavin, just right here in the country. But sure, when it comes to an overview of past, present, and future, impacts to the road, freight industry, I'm sure it spans beyond the borders of South Africa. There are also international, incidents and events that do affect and impact on the success or the failure of our industry. Let's talk about the Ukraine affair and how the war that we've seen in Ukraine has impacted on your industry.
Yeah, Tamila, we thought that COVID-19 was going to be the biggest and the worst sort of external factor that would really hit us both as a country but as a sector. During COVID-19, we saw queues standing at border posts because of the various protocols. There were many industries that closed down. There were transporters who had no jobs. We just got over the COVID-19 hurdle or tidal wave of disruption, and we got into this Ukraine affair. Now, I'm not exactly sure everybody knows exactly what's happening there. I definitely don't. But we've again suddenly seen something thousands of kilometers away from the country, affecting our businesses. So we have the huge oil shortages or the fossil fuel shortages, in other words, the petroleum products that have risen at incredible prices, not only in South Africa, in other countries as well,
right,
which immediately locked a whole span of small transporters who do not have the financial resources or ability to roll themselves over every month, because transporters don't get paid immediately after the work is done. And that is something that we've seen as a tremendous challenge, especially for our SMME players in the market. And then obviously a lot of businesses have felt that huge pressure on them with markets being closed or where they were sourcing products now suddenly out of the window. So there's a lot of pressure on the economy. We've seen what it's done to our repo rate in terms of growth in this country, of capital being available for businesses to continue to sustain themselves. We've seen a huge effect in terms of the availability of credit and the availability of finance to refleet. And right now, we are looking at, definitely in the transport sector, alternative fuel methods.
Yeah.
And that is expensive. That's put a brake on that quite seriously. Then we have huge criminal activity in the country, which
right,
really has grown out of proportion in the last 3 years. And what we saw in July 2021, where we had those huge riots in the KZN, that seems to be continuing, albeit not as huge and as wide and as shockingly as we saw it, but the attacks on the logistics system just seem to continue unabated, and we don't seem to be able in this country to stop that sort of criminal activity.
What does that say about investor confidence when criminality doesn't seem like it's being brought to book? I mean, quite recently, or rather a couple of weeks ago, we had the Reserve Bank Governor Lesetja Kganyago right here on the show, Gavin. And one thing he was telling us that while he was doing his international rounds of trips with the IMF, etc., out in the United States, it seemed investors, global investors, were asking, where are the convictions? We see criminality, we see the attacks on cargos, for example, when you talk about, in the context of road freight and logistics. We see the attacks on agriculture. We see criminality, but where are the convictions? And I just wonder, does that then impact on investor confidence?
Oh, yes, Jamila, obviously there's a huge impact. And we must remember that we're moving into a new period or a new dawn. And this is not what our president talks about, but it is part of that in terms of Africa, in terms of the African Free Continental Trade Agreement or area. And we are going to find that a lot of global players are going to say, perhaps I should move my goods through, and I'm just going to pick some examples, through Namibia, Mozambique, or Angola, or wherever, because it might be longer, the delays might be a little bit more, but the security of the goods is far better than moving them through South Africa. We used to be the gateway to Africa. We're losing that because we cannot guarantee security of goods through the country. And then, of course, we can't guarantee efficiency at the very terminals, the ports where the ships come in. So we're starting to lose ship sailings as well, because around us, our neighboring countries are striving to get that work, which means employment in their countries, it means investment in their countries, and a far better living wage. We've really, really got to sort out this criminality. Otherwise, we are going to lose a lot of work into and through South Africa.